Hello, I'm Renee. Welcome back to my channel, The Left-Handed Reader. I thought I would just give you an update on my reading since the last time. It is morning here. I'm about to start work. I've already been working. I had an early morning call at 6 a.m. Because I work with a group in the UK. So I am now taking a break from that before I start up again. So what have I finished? I have finished, I don't know whether I mentioned these books or not, but I don't think so, because I just picked this up at the library when I was there over the weekend. I saw it sitting there, and it's a memoir by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and I hope I'm pronouncing that close. She's a Nigerian writer, and this was a very short, it's a novella, a memoir about her experience when her father died unexpectedly in 2020. So it was right at the beginning of the pandemic. They were on Zoom calls. Her father was a Nigerian professor and wasn't expected to pass away. He was keeping things to himself, it seems, about his kidney disease. So she's shocked. She's not able to go to Nigeria. What I felt about picking up this book was that I would be able to get inside her reading in this short memoir, because I haven't read any of her other books. It looks like she's got a nonfiction called We Should All Be Feminists, and a couple other feminist writing, and a novel, or two novels, Americana and Half of a Yellow Sun, and Purple Hibiscus. So what I loved about her writing here is it's such a short memoir, but it's packed full of very descriptive language, but not in a fluffy or overwrought way. If anyone's ever experienced a loved one passing away unexpectedly, that type of grief is a particular kind. She really reflects it here well, I felt. I loved learning about the burial rituals in that part of Nigeria that the family's in, which I don't recall, and what her and what Chimamanda and her brother feel about those traditions. I marked a tiny passage here just to give you a sense. These are really, really short chapters, not paragraphs. She says, "Grief is a cruel kind of education. You learn how ungentle mourning can be, how full of anger. You learn how much grief is about language, the failure of language, and the grasping for language. I did not know that we cry with our muscles. The pain is not surprising, but its physicality is." And she goes on. That's just a tiny snippet of what the language is like. So I'm really excited to know this author. And I felt that this memoir was her way of honoring her father. She goes into a little bit about her father's earlier life. It's just wonderful. Highly, highly recommend. Another one that I got as a hold is this newly released book in the US, Foster by Keegan. I just read Small Things Like These, the Booker Prize long list, and I guess short list. And this is a book that says it's required reading in Ireland. And Claire Keegan was raised on a farm in Ireland, which makes this book even more interesting, because it's about a little girl, maybe 8 or 9, I don't think it's explicitly said, who is brought out to a farm by her parents one summer, the Kinsellas. And I finished reading this yesterday morning before I started work, and my eyes were full of tears not because there's anything sad, or bad things happen. It's just the world that you are quickly dropped into of this 8 or 9 year old little girl experiencing things differently at the farm with these two older people, the Kinsellas, and how Claire Keegan is very sparse with her writing, but somehow can convey a mood, an atmosphere, a feeling with very sparse writing. It would be very hard for most writers to write sparsely, but be able to create the scene that you're in the way that Claire Keegan does. I liked this book, loved this book, but I liked it even better than Small Things Like These. So I highly recommend this as a real treat. I'm still thinking about this little girl and her experience. Oh my God. Okay. I am also on Bookstagram, I have mentioned, and this is a Bookstagram find from someone that I'm connected with. And I looked for this series when I was in the library, and I found it. This is a detective series. It's not a detective series. It's an investigation series by Joseph Hansen, and I guess these are republished. And there are I heard it said that, where did I see here? This writer's been writing for 50 years. I'm very new to this series, but I read Agatha Christie when I was young, and I like a good crime series, but I haven't really been into it since then. So when I heard about this investigator, Dave Brandstetter, written by Joseph Hansen, it just sounded so fun. Brandstetter is an insurance investigator, and there's a description of this series by a writer up front. The first thing I ever read by Joseph Hansen was Fade Out. That was the book I was really looking for that was mentioned on Bookstagram. It might be the first book in the series. It was written in 1970. It's the seminal novel in a mystery series about a smart, tough, uncompromising insurance investigator by the name of David Brandstetter. He's a Korean War vet, ruggedly masculine. He's educated. He is neither tarnished nor afraid. Oh, and one other thing, he's gay. He's not the first gay detective to hit mainstream crime fiction, but he was the first normal gay detective, and that, as the poet said, has made all the difference. This particular crime is about a surfing-themed, there's a murder at a surfing-themed gay bar on the boardwalk. I don't recall where this takes place. They're suspecting that a local hustler named Larry Johns might have done the murder, and Dave Brandstetter is thinking otherwise. It's funny because he's put into the scene of these crimes because if somebody had a life insurance policy, then he's investigating. I guess it's a really cool setup, and they're simple and fun so far, but well written, and so I am giving that a try. I'm also reading Excellent Women by Barbara Pym, a nice faded copy from the library. I have read a couple. Barbara Pym, they're reliable. To me, they're palate cleansers. I always go in thinking, oh, this is light and simple and cute, spinster novel maybe, in some cases, well, in a lot of cases. But then her stories are really nuanced. They're not just simple and light and everything is fine. Same with this one. This is about a spinster, so-called spinster at the time, Mildred Lafbury, and in the 1950s. And she has an apartment, and there's a couple that's down below her, and she gets embroiled in their lives. Of course, she doesn't want to be, but she is. There is a run-in with the, I guess, is it clergyman, a pastor is what I would call it, at the church, Julian, who is convinced that that Mildred has a crush on him. So he goes about trying to dodge her a little bit because he's actually getting married, and she's always trying to convince him that she's never in love with him. But just really fun. I love the writing because it's not just simple and light. There's always something else there. I'm never disappointed by a Barbara Pym, so it's just been really fun. The next one is Toad by Katherine Dunn, and I guess she's best known for Geek Love, which is one of her novels written in the 70s but set in the 60s. This one was never published, even though this was written before Geek Love, and it's written about a group of friends in the 60s, and it really reads like a memoir. And I saw this written up in the New York Times. It's somewhat close to Katherine Dunn's own experience in college, and she's known to be a writer that's dark humor. So it was a very unique feminine voice at the time. And that's true of this story too. There's some gross scenes or just aspects of her friends. An apartment of one of her friends is filled with too many cats, and there's just cat droppings and pee all over the place, and the friend eats horse meat, and it's just weird. And it's sometimes I get to a chapter and it's just too weird, and I just have to put it aside for a while, and I think, am I going to finish this? So far, I'm almost halfway through. Not all of it is that weird stuff, so I'm keeping with it. I really like the nuanced writing about her friends. It's mainly around her own experience as she's described as a hermit, and Sam and Carlotta, who are two people that get together, and Rennell and a couple other people, and they're in college, but sometimes they're not in college, and how they're just scraping their lives together. But it's the language, it's the writing, her really unique voice for the time. I don't know if anybody else was writing like this, so that's why I'm in it. So we will see. The other book that I have that's been on my list to read for quite a while, but I haven't started yet, is Detransition, Baby. I'm really late to this party, but I've heard so many people that that I'm connected with on Bookstagram and BookTube talk about this book, and so I will be starting this at some point. I wanted to, and I do have some library holds, which I'll talk about the next time, that are waiting for me, that I'll dip into and see if I'm going to read them. But I wanted to talk before I end about TBRs, because one thing I've noticed about Bookstagram and BookTube is that many people, I'd say most people, have a TBR. Either a TBR on Goodreads that they've just clicked off, these are books that I want to read, or a physical TBR. I guess that means the books that they own that they haven't read. I've never had an ongoing TBR list. I mean, sure, I own books that I haven't read, so I guess just by default I have a TBR, my physical TBR, so fine. But I don't have an ongoing TBR list, probably because I don't do that on Goodreads or any other website like that. And what I don't do, but I admire, is people who have books that maybe they've just bought or they already own, and they put this stack together. of books that they're going to read for the month. I've never done that. I don't even know if I could do that. I think the main reason I don't do it is that I constantly reserve books at the library and I don't know when I'm going to get them. And when I get them, then I probably start reading them because I want to get them back. So that's probably one of the main reasons I don't do it. And I'm just a real heavy mood reader. So, I mean, there might be a book that I know now that I'm part of Bookstagram that I'm going to read at a certain time frame. Probably just one though, like the E.M. Forrester read along I was in. I ended up reading 2 E.M. Forrester books in October. I never would have done that without that read along, without the schedule of we're reading this one first, we're reading this one second. And then I'm in a War and Peace read along that I'm really looking forward to that starts on January 1st. And we are to read a chapter a week as a guide. You can pre-read, you can forward read, whatever you want, but we have a Discord channel where we'll be discussing it. So that was my first time creating a Discord or getting into a Discord group. So I admire people that have a TBR. I don't know whether I'll ever do that. I've been mentally thinking about, like, could I really sketch out what I want to read before the end of the year? I've been seeing that a lot on Bookstagram. No, I can't. I just can't. So anyway, thanks for listening.